Mirror's Edge, in the eyes of speedrunners, was a godsend when the game was released in 2008. The game was based on flow, movement, and fast action. A perfect recipe for the players that would optimize the landscape of this amazing game for years to come. Mirror's Edge came with a package of replayable modes, such as time trials and chapter speedruns. This would be the main form of competition on PS3 and Xbox 360, but once the port to the PC came out in 2009, 3 players would put on the gloves and get to work. This video will focus on the skill and innovations of these 3 players, and how their persistence pushed the game to where it is now. All 3 of them have an amazing legacy, but on January 20th of 2020, the last remaining time trial world record set by the 3 players was beaten. Good afternoon, and welcome to a deep dive into the story of the 3 old gods of Mirror's Edge. I hope you enjoy. Before we begin to discuss our first individual, let's talk about the game, and what makes it so great for speedrunning. The moveset in Mirror's Edge is already rock solid, running on walls, climbing pipes, springboard jumps, etc. Faith just feels great to control, and would feel even better with the help of a couple of unintended movement techniques that was found by the speedrunners of the game in its early heyday. Instead of having to wait for Faith to get to full running speed, you can instead do something called a side jump boost. By holding A or D while jumping, Faith will sidestep in a direction, and by turning 90 degrees after a sidestep, you're at full running speed immediately. Wall boosting is another speed technique, performed by binding your jump button to the scroll wheel on your mouse. This will essentially spam jump inputs and allow you to gain a bunch of speed by looking into a wall and scrolling a bunch. The last big discovery I will mention is the kick glitch. This is the bread and butter of the game, and is one of the most fun tricks to master. When Faith does a wall run kick, an invisible floor will be put beneath her for 1 frame. This 1 frame floor allows you to do any grounded actions such as sliding or jumping. This essentially allows you to double jump, and if done between multiple walls, you can chain kick glitches into, well, a kick glitch chain. Mastering the 1 frame timing for the kick glitch becomes natural after a while, but is a nightmare when you're first picking up the game. Not only that, but kick glitches send you off at different angles depending on how you approach a wall to perform the kick. If you come at it from a 45-degree angle, Faith will be sent along the wall, whereas if you approach it from an angle directly along the wall, you will be sent away from it. There are countless other small optimizations that are used in the runs we're about to go over, but if I were to go over all of them, we'd be here all day. Once the movement is fully understood and mastered, it's time to do some runs. The 3 old gods of Mirror's Edge found interest in both the chapter speedrun mode and the time trials, but in this video I will only be covering the time trials. If this video garners interest in the subject, I'd be happy to cover the world record history on all 10 chapters in the chapter speedrun mode. Now, there are a total of 33 time trials. 23 of them come with the vanilla game, and 9 of them came with a DLC pack. The last time trial, Synesthesia, did come with the DLC pack as well, but for some reason was exclusive to console only. Through modding, however, the map was added on PC and allowed on the leaderboard, but not until 2015. So for the sake of the stories I'm about to lay out in front of you, let's ignore this level. If we discount Synesthesia, every single time trial at the end of 2013 was held by one of the 3 gods, except for one, and the first person to come up on the scene to show his impressive skill was Adrenalize. Adrenalize held 4 of the 33 records at the end of 2013. That might not seem like a lot, but consider the fact that he was one of the game's first proper optimizers, and a large amount of the records was only beaten by the other 2 gods. He had 4 that were simply unmatched for the time, and were not beaten for several years. His 4 records were Flight, Storm Drains 2, Factory, and Convoy 1.
This possibly Swiss guy who used to record with a camcorder right in front of him, wearing his gold chain, which you can see in the reflection of his like earlier videos. I think back then, I think it's like 2010, 2011 when he started getting his records, and he just like wiped the floor compared to everyone else. Like a lot of people were setting records on console still back then. All of them weren't on PC like you'll find nowadays. But he'd be sat there on his, I guess, computer that isn't good enough to record with his webcam recording, the little red light in the reflection.
Yeah.
And like his movement is just so much better than you'd expect someone who didn't have a community to base it around. So like you imagine he's the first guy who's really good at the game. He's had to sit there and figure that stuff out by himself, which is just crazy when you see, like, if you compare it to the runs of today, it's not that good. His very first records aren't that great, but his movement is very clean and he doesn't lose speed. Like, he knows how to do it.
I suppose you could say the bad quality brings out some early 2010s nostalgia. Let's be honest, it was probably this or unregistered Hypercam 2. Pick your poison. Regardless of the quality, Adrenalize knew how to move well, and already back around 2010, 2011, he was considered the best player in the game for sure.
There was always kind of that divide between the any percent runners and the chapter and time trial runners. And these guys, like the chapter and time trial runners, in a way they were like in a league of their own, because they, and this is very much what I would say about Ozzy Fly, they had these insane strats that none of us would ever really try in our runs, because we do any percent, or because we're not like hardcore dedicated to chapter or time trial runs like they are. And they would pull off these insane things that when you watch the video, like, it completely blows your mind.
Adrenalize had the vision for using the best strategic options, utilizing Faith's moveset to the best of his ability. This is very apparent in his 44.99 former record, where he maneuvers Faith at top speed everywhere despite the whole level being so narrow. He makes it look so easy. Another testament to his skill and innovation is his Storm Drains 2 world record, which was the final Adrenalize record to be beaten from the early era. He did come back briefly to play Reflex Redux, but a newer runner, Rec, was too much for the old dog to handle. Storm Drains 2 was the longest standing and last Adrenalized record, which stood from May 2013 to February 2018.
Yeah, the main one that comes to mind is his Storm Drains 2 run. That stood for like 5 years or something until Rec beat it. That was an impressive run. Some insane strats for the he did it.
The kickless chains and the way that you can navigate that time trial. There are so many different variations and so many different ways you can try doing that. So I imagine there were quite a few runners that probably didn't even look at that time trial with any kind of seriousness, because they look at it and they just think like, yeah, screw that, I'm not even gonna try. And then they watch Adrenalize's video, which, even if it did get beaten by quite a lot in the end, if you're looking at it from the perspective of a runner who wants to try and find strats or beat it in some way, it's a very spooky video to go up against, because it is insanely good.
The main reason why Storm Drains 2 is so varied in its route potential is because it's a descending time trial where you start from the very top part of the level and work your way down through the checkpoints until you reach the end. Kickless chains will gain you a ton of speed, but only with the cost of a decent amount of height. This is perfect for the checkpoint layout of Storm Drains 2. Adrenalize was able to figure out a super strong route for 2013 and pulled it off flawlessly.
You've got Storm Drains 2, which is like one of the classic Mirror's Edge runs. If you look at any Mirror's Edge record over the years, I think that was more 2013. I remember, a weird one to remember is one of his flight records, because I swear there's a comment on there which stuck with me, where he was like, "This was a really hard record to get, treating myself with pizza tonight." And I think that might have been the one where he does the kick glitch off the antenna, which is like, I'm pretty sure he found that, and that's the first run with that in it, which is insane. It's a really hard trick to do even now when you know how to do it properly. But that's another thing, he figured that one out by himself and like put it in a run, and it's such a clean run as well.
From around 2010 to 2013, Adrenalize was a master of his craft. Mostly uncontested around 2010 and 2011, but around 2012, a new runner was on the come-up, and he was about to give Adrenalize a run for his money. Enter our second god, Basstune. Basto was a truly amazing player. At the end of 2012, he had every time trial world record in the game, only missing out on Office, and at the end of 2013, he held 19 of the 32 records, over half the game. Definitely a lot more than Adrenalize's 4 records, but if it wasn't for Basto, Adrenalize would have probably still had many records still standing after 2013. Basto was a player from France, a player determined to show that he was the best of the game. There was no denying that he was when he almost swept the game in 2012. He strove for perfection, and was the first player that really started to look like a PC player. A couple of runners from the early console era would still be playing the PC version like it was console, which was ultimately slower. Basto put all of that behind him.
I think he started out with a couple of records here and there, and then 2012, from what I remember, is Bastune's, like, that was the year for Basstune in Mirror's Edge, and I think he set out. You can see in like some of the old like descriptions and comments and stuff, it seems like he's setting out to try and get all the Mirror's Edge world records in one go. And he's like, you see, towards like the sort of end of 2012, he'd got like almost all of them within that year, mostly within like the end of the year. So he must have been playing the game so much, and you can really see that in his movement in like some of the like movement heavy ones, like Atrium 1 and stuff. His movement is just so smooth. It's not like all the moves he does and all the tricks he does aren't as optimized as you'd see today, but again, there wasn't the community back then, so he's had to just improve on what Adrenalize has already set as the foundations, and just really refine the movement there. And he got, I think, all the DLC time trials, almost all of the regular time trials, maybe everything but Office, I want to say. So that's like 22 out of 23. And then most of the chapter runs as well, like at least half of them, all within the space of a year, which is insane. That's like so much playing, and again, no community to help him out, or like he can't go and ask someone, oh, how do I do this trick? How do I do this the fastest way? He's figured all that stuff out himself, which is just absolutely insane.
Basto's innovations to some of the time trials he played were very unique. On Playgrounds 1, normally players would just run forward to get to the first checkpoint, but Basto goes to the left and does a kick glitch into a wall boost that puts him at 61 km per hour and gets him to the first checkpoint faster. On Storm Drains 3, Basto does a kick glitch and clips through a pole by looking away from it, which was a pretty unheard of technique at the time. One final example is a very difficult kick glitch he does off the satellite dish at the start of Convoy 2. The strat is pretty absurd due to the deceptively small hitbox. Basto's records on average would last about 3 to 4 years until runners who specialized in any percent would come along to try and challenge them. Towards the end of his career, he would create some amazing videos with suitable music to tell the story about how he grinded a record out.
Yeah, Basto had these really cool story videos where he'd like set out to beat a time trial by like some ridiculous amount with some ridiculous strats he had, and then like he'd get like an initial run and then he'd like improve it by like, you know, a few seconds with some new strats, and then get like the sick run. Heat, I remember, had just the sickest track behind it. That was an absolute banger. And it was such an impressive run for its time. Like, it had a speedy kick glitch in it, which, you know, you never saw in runs back then. That's another one that I also beat Basto with, like many years after he said it, and I didn't even beat it by that much. I beat it by like less than 0.1 of a second. So it really does show how insane Basto was at time trials.
Basto's videos were always really fun to watch because he had these stories in his videos. So he wouldn't, whereas a lot of people just kind of publish the world record as it is in a 30-second clip of a time trial, he would kind of make the video into like 2 minutes long. And he would tell the story of how he got to that world record, of showing some of his like failed attempts that were still insanely good, but not quite as good as the end. And, you know, he would start with him beating his time by like 0.2 of a second. And then he'd be like, that's good, but I could do better. And then he would beat it again by like 0.5, and he'd be like,
Then his music and editing style is just phenomenal. I don't know, I had a little look at his very first record a little bit ago, and he's got this like crazy guitar music with this like really low res intro, and then it just cuts to the run, which has no music over it. And then he sort of gained an obsession for Katy Perry and Flow Rider, which I'm all for. That's I think Bastune's really got me into Flow Rider over the years. It started ironically, but now you've just got to love it. The Flow one from the DLC time trials. That's because that used to be my favorite time trial, so I used to watch that one quite a bit. And that one definitely has a Flow Rider song on it. I want to say it's I Cry. What a classic. And then obviously later on he did his like Stories series, which is phenomenal. Would really recommend that series of runs, because you can see the progression of how he adds tricks, and that's probably what he did earlier, but he didn't edit them into the videos.
But yeah, I think Basto just fully understood Mirror's Edge movement, and that was why he had so many world records in time trials, because he knew how to manipulate it.
I remember when I picked up Mirror's Edge around 2014. The majority of the time trial and chapter records were held by Basstune, which led me to believe that maybe he or the current top any % players were the best of the best at the time. But I was always guided off with a clear answer, no matter who I asked. The answer was never Basstune, it wasn't anyone on the leaderboards that I knew. The answer was always Ozzy Fly. Ozzy Fly was by a landslide highly regarded in 2013 and 2014 as the best and most ahead of his time player. He was absolutely fearless. He was willing to go for things in chapter runs and time trials that everyone else was too scared to do. He was a complete madman, and just like Adrenalize and Basstune, he was a complete mystery. Nobody knew who he was, and barely anyone communicated with him. But despite not interacting with the community very much, his skill clearly shined through as some of the best movement anyone had ever seen.
Yeah, so Ozzy Fly appeared sort of out of nowhere. I don't know if he appeared in comments beforehand. I don't really recall that being a thing, but he was just out like straight from the start. He was the best. Pretty much no one could touch him. He was like beating a couple of records by quite a fair amount, not a crazy amount to start with, but you could tell from his movement it was just perfect. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he wasn't like wobbling about like anyone else. He was just like straight lines, exactly to the point. Every movement like seemed intended. Again, you could tell his like movement was different to everyone else's, but his was just like precise. Like this guy like knew what he was doing, and you couldn't beat his runs. Once he set a record, that pretty much seemed to be it, and it only got better.
Ozzy Fly at the end of 2013 had 7 world records in his hands. Not as many as Basstune, but these records were some of the best in the game, and they sure stood for the longest. Quality over quantity was the name of the game for Ozzy Fly. On the time trial Ireland, Ozzy Fly's wall boost on the big blue sign were max speed, and his ending had a speedy kick glitch to launch himself into the end goal at 42 km per hour. A speedy kick glitch is when you step up on a ledge at the exact time as you initiate a wall run kick. The small bump from getting up on the ledge gives you a tiny bit more speed, which Ozzy Fly intentionally went for at the end. The result of this mastery of a run is every split being green. His The Edge record was regarded as one of the best in the game when it came out. His movement was otherworldly, and the strats he pulled off were unfathomable. In fact, I think it's so nuts that you're gonna have to see it for yourself. Here is Ozzy Fly's The Edge 33.73 from April 2013.
his Edge world record, 33.73. I remember the time because I probably watched it so much over the years. That was the one to beat, but no one could beat it because it was just so perfect. It had really hard orange rail kick glitch, and then later on it had a speedy kick glitch near the end of the run. And apart from that, the movement was just sick, like untouchable movement.
His movement up the stairs at the very beginning is insane. And this is 2013, and then he does that speedy kick glitch off the pole. I'm not even sure if that's intentional. I have a feeling it must be intentional, but I didn't know speedy kick glitches were a thing for so long.
Another two of my favorite runs from Ozzy Fly were his set of Cranes world records. Both of these runs feature a really insane kick glitch wall boost to get across the gap over to the red crane area, which nobody had figured out at the time but Ozzy Fly.
Another memorable time trial run from Ozzy Fly is definitely Cranes 2. So there's a really hard trick right at the start of Cranes 2 where you kick glitch and wall boost, and then really soon after you have to do a kick glitch on the red crane, which is something I've never figured out how to do. And this dude who's like not too great as English, so I don't think he's been like taught by anyone else how to do this stuff. He's just figured out how to fucking do this crazy trick.
The mystery surrounding Ozzy Fly was always incredibly odd. A lot of people in the community around 2013, 2014 would have loved to have a chat with Ozzy Fly about his approach, his strategies, and maybe what he was working on next. But he was almost impossible to reach. You'd have to be lucky for him to add you on Steam, and he wouldn't always respond. Sometimes you'd have to resort to the good old YouTube comments and hope he responds.
The sort of mystery of him kind of grew as you sort of read his descriptions and his YouTube comments. His English isn't the best, or wasn't the best at the time, and he's got a lot of quotable moments over the years from his runs and comments. Some really good ones out there, which makes it really funny. And also his recording software. He didn't start out, unlike Basto and Adrenalize, he didn't start out recording a screen, but he's always had some sort of like Bandicam 2 type situation. Not Bandicam 2, what is it? Unregistered Hypercam 2 situation going on.
He would just record using like Bandicam, like some free downloadable video recording software. He would record in like kind of crappy quality, even for 2014, with like these watermarks all over the videos. And then it would just be him popping off doing these like insane strats. So I just found like the contrast between, the way he records the videos and the stuff he's doing in the videos really kind of authentic.
A watermark for the recording software and the editing software at once, and those are just brilliant. The more watermarks, the faster the run. That's my theory.
Ozzy Fly was not only a great example of what perfect movement was supposed to look like in 2013 and 2014, but he was a great example of an innovator. A person who was able to think outside of the box. The ability to be godlike at the game and find strats all over the place is not a skill many can say they have. The stunning part is that all of the three gods, Adrenalize, Basstune, and Ozzy Fly, shared this gift. But I think Ozzy Fly might have been in a league of his own. On August 1st, 2014, Ozzy Fly uploaded a video titled Chapter 3 Big Jump Shortcut. The video showed Ozzy Fly skipping the necessary climb on the big red crane at the end of Chapter 3, meaning you can kick glitch right across to the end area. This immediately saved 20 seconds in full game any % runs, but also individual Chapter 3 speedruns. Later that year, on November 11th, Ozzy Fly would upload a massive improvement on the Chapter 3 world record, nailing the newly found Crane's kick glitch at the very end of the run. According to the YouTube comments, he failed between 30 and 50 runs that got to the trick, but finally pulled it off. This speedy kick glitch that he failed so many times is much harder than normal speedy kick glitches due to the bump in the terrain being far smaller than usual.
He didn't post many videos, but when he did post a video, it was a world record, or it was a video of insane quality that showed him doing some strats that a lot of people couldn't do if you gave them like 30 minutes to grind it out. Whether that's prologue, kick glitch chain, or whether that's like the Chapter 5 kick glitch chain, or any of the strats in Chapter 5, he was doing strats in one speed run, in one chapter run, that people couldn't do one time in like 30 minutes.
He really did have some insane chapter runs. Like his chapter 3 record with Crane's kick glitch, like in 2013. Like, I just can't believe anyone could even do that trick back then. Just so insane.
Yeah, he just goes too fast for you to understand what he's doing at any point. So you try and replicate his runs, and you've got no chance. There's absolutely no chance at all.
And I think he just couldn't help himself. Like, I think he just loved taking risks in chapter runs. I think he loved being able to do those completely insane strats in a row in the same video. And that was why he was always just the single best player.
While Ozzy Fly didn't upload very much past his prime in 2013 and 2014, his legacy will be remembered and his time trial and chapter records would hold up for multiple years until the other runners would catch up to him. He did briefly come back in 2017 to set a new Atrium 2 record, but was beaten by Votium in January of 2020. This marked the last record ever set by one of the old time trial gods. Adrenalize was knocked out with Storm Drains 2, falling in 2018. Basstune fell in 2018 with his Razmataz record being beaten, and in 2020, Ozzy Fly's last record fell on Atrium 2. This essentially marks the end of an era for Mirror's Edge, with the Twitch community finally having caught up and have now surpassed the 3 players in skill and optimization. But I'll talk about one more thing regarding Ozzy Fly. The question was always brought up in 2014.
There was always this discussion in the any percent community, like, what if Ozzy Fly started doing any percent? What if he started running any percent and taking it seriously? The world record was like 35. Whoa, you know, if Ozzy Fly ran, he could get like 31 or something with the strats he uses. But I always just think, like, maybe Ozzy Fly tried a few times with any percent, but I think his style and the way he plays the game is way more kind of complementary to chapter runs and time trials than any percent, because of what I was saying earlier about him taking risks and him not being able to help himself almost. Like, he wants to do every single hardcore strat and he wants to get it all in one big run for a chapter run. So I feel like he takes the same philosophy and applies it to any percent, and then he just realizes it's like completely impossible. Like, there is no way in hell you're going to be able to do all of those strats in any percent unless you're like, you know, grind it for days and days and days. So I think there was always the question of, like, if he came to any percent, what would happen? But I almost just think it was right that he didn't, because then the illusion around him would have kind of fallen apart, and you'd have realized that he gets these runs because he's insanely consistent, his movement is insanely good, but he also grinds so much.
Yeah, it's sad. Ozzy Fly would have been a fantastic any percent runner, and it's really sad to see that he never got into it, but I can understand why. Time trials, you know, really allow you to perfect your movement and kind of show off what you're really capable of. I guess he just liked that more.
He was just a myth. Ozzy Fly was a myth. No one really knew much about him. And I think a couple of people may have talked to him on Steam or something, but apart from that, it was kind of YouTube comments and YouTube only. We knew that he was like from Germany, but we didn't know like what he was like, what he was like to talk to, or pretty much anything about him. And he was always kind of just this like mythical figure that every now and then he would post a new video. That video would blow everyone's minds in the community. And then he would like disappear again, come back with another video in a month or two, and the same thing would happen. All the while not really knowing anything about him, not really knowing how he finds these strats or gets these strats in the first place, because, you know, he was there way before us. But when we did come in, we started finding more strats, and somehow those strats found their way into his videos. And yeah, the guy was just insane. He was an absolute legend. As a sole figure in the Mirror's Edge community, he had an incredible amount of like respect and admiration from pretty much everyone who even never talked to him.
Thank you very much for watching. I've been wanting to do this video as a passion project for a very long time. to show my gratitude towards Adrenalize, Basstune, and Ozzy Fly for their contributions in one of the coolest speed games of all time. Mirror's Edge is a wonderful game and wouldn't have been pushed so far if it wasn't for those three. This video is a tribute to their runs, findings, and sick music choices. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe as there is more speedrun history and lore coming to this channel very soon. Special thanks to my first wave of Patreon supporters that decided to chip in after the last video. Your support is greatly appreciated. I don't expect anybody to become a patron due to the state of the world right now, but if you want to support me over there, I appreciate it a lot. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the video. There will be more coming soon. Take care, and have a good one. Oh, and wash your hands.